And welcome back. George Norrie with you, along with Michael Cremo. Michael, what do we learn by investigating ancient astrology and archaeology and forbidden archaeology? What do we learn?
Well, we learn a lot of things about ourselves and our place in this cosmos. One thing we learn if we look at the archaeological evidence is that humans like us have been around since the very beginning. And that means, to me, that our universe has a purpose. It's like an educational opportunity where we can understand important truths about ourselves, namely that our human bodies, or any other type of body, be it a dinosaur body or any other type of body, is a vehicle for a conscious self, a soul. And in this human form of life, we have an opportunity to understand that. So that's one big lesson I get from studying the history of our species on this planet. Another one is that this universe, on this level of reality, is constantly undergoing cycles of creation and destruction. There are periodic catastrophes that come on this level of reality, and any vehicle that we occupy, whether it's a human vehicle or a plant vehicle or a fish vehicle or an insect vehicle, is temporary. But if we want to exist on the level of permanence, we can do that.
Well, that's exciting, Michael. It really is. You've tapped into something that is just truly remarkable. You know that?
Yeah, I'm amazed every day. I kind of think the most amazing thing is that something exists, and I'm part of it. You know, I mean, that is really mind-blowing when I think about it.
Just to consider the fact that they may have had atomic weaponry back in those days is just unbelievable. And why did we lose knowledge, assuming they had high technology and stuff like that? Why did we lose that? What happened?
Well, yeah, it's the nature of this world is that nothing is permanent. There's something called entropy, which means increasing disorder. And many scientists are kind of puzzled by why, over the course of time, why there's directionality in time and why things move towards entropy or disorder. That's a big fact of reality. And it's one of the things that Robert Oppenheimer noted from the ancient Sanskrit writings, where God says, "Time I am, destroyer of the worlds." So time is always pushing in the direction of more and more disorder. So unless there is some system for preserving knowledge, it tends to get lost over time. And we see that happens in the history of the world. For example, if you look at the pyramids, they are based on not only a high level of technical knowledge and the ability to build things, but astronomical knowledge. If you look at the pyramids, if you study them very carefully, they're based on a unit of measurement that is 1 minute of latitude measured at the Earth's equator. And in order to do this, they would have to understand not only that the Earth is round, to get this unit of measurement and have the base of the pyramids be exactly this unit of measurement. The base of the Great Pyramid at Giza is 500.
And where did they get this precision, Michael?
Well, it's because they had advanced knowledge of astronomy that was lost. Like historians say that in Egypt there was a dark age that came after the building of the pyramids, and it lasted for 700 or 800 years. And actually, all the civilizations that were present at the time experienced a kind of dark age, after which knowledge that apparently was there previously was lost until it was rediscovered. Like in Europe, they had the Dark Ages after the fall of the Roman Empire, and it wasn't until they went to India and the Middle East and got manuscripts that were kept by the Islamic people throughout this Dark Age, and they were able to kind of have what they called a renaissance in Europe, where this knowledge was rediscovered. So we do have that tendency. We all tend to forget things unless we really practice to remember.
All right, let's go to the phones, Michael. Ted's truck driving in Louisiana. He'll get us started. Hi, Ted.
Yeah, hi, George. And hello to your guest, who I'd like to thank for promoting peace. It's something we all got to be doing right about now. Speaking of losing knowledge, I recently lost my Alexandria library card, but I had a couple questions from Mr. Cremo.
You got it.
I can't call it carved, but the rocks in Pumapunka, they don't look like they're carved to me. They look like they're cut with lasers. Is there anyone close to figuring out how that was done? And then one other question is, while mining gold in 95 in the jungles, 100 in Mesquite, I came across granite dragon heads that I studied for years and made a film about Quetzalcoatl. I'm curious if you've ever been interested in Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl and the dragon in the Maya and Aztec.
All right, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. These things are very interesting. I think one thing that I've looked into is sound vibration, because actually you can do quite a bit with sound instead of, in addition to talking. Sound can be used to sterilize medical instruments. Sound can be used to weld metals together. So there was a lot of talk in the ancient civilizations about the power of sound to do things, to melt rock, So I'm kind of thinking along those lines that some of these ancient people had mastered this ability to control sound or ultrasound. And with that, they may have been able to do the kinds of things that you see at these megalithic sites, where they have huge stone walls with just perfectly blending the stones together. You can hardly stick a razor into the joints between them. So that's one thing I'm looking over to. About Quetzalcoatl, I'm not a specialist in that, but I do see similar manifestations in other cultures around the world. That sort of indicates they were encountering the same kinds of beings, either from other dimensions or other places in our cosmos.
You think they had laser technology in those days too, Michael?
That's a possibility. mainly they talk about sound, but light can also be used in different ways. Like lasers are concentrated, focused, coherent beams of light that can do pretty amazing things. They can be used as weapons, again, for welding, producing a lot of heat.
Next up, let's go to our friend, the Gold Mine in California, west of the Rockies. Hi, Gold Mine.
George, thank you for taking my call. Thank you for all you do. And my goodness, all the stuff that I went through is bringing us to this day. Anyway, I believe in old technology is renewed. And it was funny that everything happened this way because I'm involved with a friend of mine that just came up with a fuelless motor that is old technology brought to new. And the cool thing about this thing, you can retrofit it to any motor.
I love that.
And what do you think that can do to this, the way society is now, the way that everybody's arguing and fighting over oil and religion?
When can you get it to marketplace, Goldmine?
That's what we're working on right now. I gave Tommy the website.
Mention it. What is it?
It is Bold Earth Scientific.com.
BoldEarthScientific.com.
And it's just we got all the patents in place now, so we want to bring it to the people for the people, and see where it goes. I mean, it's amazing because the technology can be used in zero gravity also to make motors that put out some amazing torque. I held it in my hand. I watched it work. I felt the pressure that it took, and then it took off and just didn't want to stop. It was crazy.
Let me ask you something, Michael, too, based on that. If old technology just went over hundreds of thousands of years, would it be just disintegrated? Would it just disappear because of aging?
Yeah, I think there are different kinds of technologies based on different kinds of energies. Our technology that we're familiar with today, we're dealing with the gross physical elements and our understanding of them and our study of them that have allowed us to make certain types of machineries and other types of technologies. But in the past, there may have been civilizations based on more subtle understandings of subtle elements. And a lot of their technologies may have been controlled in paranormal ways by mind and intelligence directly rather than dealing with the grosser elements. So I think a lot of our technologies today are our attempts to express in gross material elements powers and abilities that people naturally possessed in previous ages, like telepathic communication, remote viewing, and things like that, which we still have to some degree, but because we're not practiced in using them, most people aren't aware of it. But maybe our technologies like our mobile phones with the ability to see images and hear things from distant places instantaneously is our way of expressing in our technology some ability that people naturally had before. So that's my thought.
Let's go to James in Newport News, Virginia. Hey, Jim, go ahead.
Hey, George. Hey, you always let me mention my book. That's getting boring to you, probably, huh? Can I do it?
I just hope you sell 1 million copies. Go ahead.
Well, I doubled my copies from 2 to 4 last month. But
all right, we're on a roll. We're on a roll, Jimmy.
Oh, we're going big now. We're coming up. Yeah, it's Blessed with an Angel and a Rainbow, and it talks about Revelation 12. That's why I updated it. One of the things. Not only was the eclipse a month before that, approximately, only in the United States, and that only happened before in 1776 when our country was formed. So the eclipse that happened, on August 21, 2017, would be our judgment. God giving judgment to America, and judgment means He's judging us because we kicked him out of our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. So he can't put his hedge of protection on the devil anymore. So the devil can do more to us and to our country. So we have to get an individual hedge of protection from the Lord and pray for that for our families and that. And that when that happened, 1/3 of the angels tried to overtake heaven. That's the Revelation 12. It's a celestial event, so it's a proven thing. It's not astrology; it's astronomy. And it happened with the Virgo with the garland of 12 stars over her head. Jupiter goes in her lower womb and comes, and the moon's at her feet, and the sun's she's clothed with the sun, which is above her shoulder. And the snake is the constellation for the dragon.
Well, that brings us exactly what to this question is, Michael. How many things were based on ancient realistic events that the Bible had as a story, like I mentioned that before?
Well, eclipses are real events, and, there's a lot of stuff connected with them. Like in the Vedic text, it's described that an eclipse occurs when a demoniac being tries to devour the sun or the moon, depending upon what type of an eclipse it is. And this demoniac being was called Rahu, and there was another one called Ketu. And they actually represent actual astronomical things. They're the
real events,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Where the moon and the sun, when the moon intersects the ecliptic, which is the circle that goes through the sky that follows the path of the zodiac and the 12 signs of the zodiac. So the moon goes through that circle twice. It goes up through it and then down through the other side. So it actually represents an astronomical event. So I think in a lot of these texts, knowledge is embedded.
I think you're right, Michael. I think you're right. We're going to come back and take final calls with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, back with our final segment with Michael Cremo. Michael's website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Let's go back to the phones. Brendan in Austin, Texas. Get us started here, Brendan. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, guys. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. I just had to make sure. Thank you, Cremo. You're one of my favorite guests to listen to. I wanted to quickly bring up a flying city in the Vedic text because you were talking so much about that, and I'm a big fan of it. And there's one called Savanagar, and it was attacking the city of Dwarka in this specific section called Draupadi's argument. It's like Daupardi's argument in the Mahabharata, and it specifically describes that flying city as like a machine, and then they use these missiles to shoot it down, and everybody starts jumping off, and like there's a bunch of smoke. But the next chapter, that's when they go to the Astras. They go to the sky gods for weapons. And I was wondering if you had heard of anything of underneath the ocean or underground, because after that battle takes place, they have to clear the ocean of, I think it was like 20 million soldiers. I wish I could remember the number of soldiers, but it was millions of people in undersea bunkers. And that was the next campaign they had to free Earth from these slave kings who had the flying cities.
Wow, did you ever run into anything like that, Michael?
Yes. Actually, the flying city, the Vimana that he's talking about, was an example of extraterrestrial technology transfer. There was a king on this earth who was on the side of the forces of darkness in the universe. As I said, they have technologies. And the chief engineer of the forces of darkness, technically they were called the Daityas, they gave this weapon to this king on Earth who used it to attack the city of Dwarka, and which there's still a city of that name on the coast of northwestern India in the Gujarat province. I've been to it, and it's stated that this flying machine, this Vimana warship that was used to attack the city, when it was shot down, it crashed in the ocean off the coast of the present town of Dwarka. Archaeologists, marine archaeologists, have done some exploration of the coast off the city of this town, and they found there the remains of an ancient city.
Wow.
Now, in these ancient Sanskrit writings, it's described that there were civilizations existing under the water and within the earth or below it, the subterranean levels. There was Varuna, who was the god of the sea, who had a whole empire beneath the waves of the ocean. So, yeah, and sometimes entities from people from the terrestrial level would go down into the water under the ocean to retrieve people who had been taken as captives down there. So yes, the kinds of things that the caller is talking about are things that I'm familiar with. Actually, there's a whole subterranean level as well, inhabited by creatures called nagas, which are sort of like reptilian humanoid type creatures. They're generally depicted with half human and half serpent bodies, in temple carvings and things like that. So, yeah, there are a lot of things like that mentioned in the ancient Sanskrit texts, which people are encountering today, and they talk about things like that.
Michael, do you think a investigation of the ocean floor might find that craft that plunged into the sea?
Well, it would be a good place to start looking for something like that. Sometimes things are preserved for a long time in the sea, like the Antikythera mechanism, which was a very complicated astronomical computer. It was made by Greeks over 2,000 years ago, and it was preserved in a shipwreck in the Mediterranean for a couple thousand years. So yeah, you can sometimes find things on the ocean floor that give evidence for unexpected technology. Like this Antikythera mechanism had dozens of gears and wheels in it that you could use to calculate eclipses, predict the movements of the stars and planets. It's pretty amazing. And then it was lost. That technology was lost. It wasn't reacquired until hundreds or maybe even 1,000 years later.
Michael, before we go to calls, I got a quick little note. One of our longtime favorite listeners, Louise from Kentucky, I am told by Tom, has passed away. A listener who knows of her from Kentucky said she passed away in her sleep, and she would always call the show being the reincarnated Cleopatra and was just a fun person. And We're told that she died. So our condolences to her family and prayers for her soul. I know she's up in heaven somewhere. Let's go to Joe, Long Island, New York. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. Yeah, sorry about Louise. Two questions, Michael. One is the issue of language barriers is still here today. For example, Google Translator has where you can listen to Mandarin as people are talking Mandarin, and it translates, but it's not necessarily 100% accurate. So I'd ask you about like the history of language barriers. Say, like on a remote Pacific island, if they had a local dialect and they did want to get resources or trade, how much of an obstacle was that and how much knowledge was lost? And my second question, you said previous episodes that you've been to, done work in Rome, ancient Rome. Do you think that bread and circuses was an accurate depiction of what was going on there with the chariot races and so on, free food? Was that really accurate? And what do you think of Michelangelo's stuff when you saw it in person? What was your impression?
Well, I have been to Rome and I've looked around. I haven't really focused on Roman history. I'm kind of dealing with deeper history. But in terms of the language barriers, I think that is a problem. Of course, in the Bible, they have the whole story of the Tower of Babel, where language was introduced specifically for that purpose, to make it harder for these people to complete their project, which was to build literally a stairway to heaven. So that can be a problem, but it seems like even in places where they do have different languages, people from different communities either come up with some common language that they can use to communicate with each other, or they find ways to communicate without the use of language. So, yeah, that is a difficulty. Like, somehow by some accident of history, English has become the world language. Scientific conferences all over the world are held in English. If somebody wants to succeed in international business, pretty much they have to know English. So that does kind of create a barrier for people to enter into these different fields if English is their second or third language. So I appreciate what you've said about that. Somehow or other, as I've been growing up, as I've lived my life, I've acquired a reading knowledge of most of the European languages. I don't have a reading knowledge of Chinese or Japanese or those related languages. Sanskrit, I have a good acquaintance with, and some others as well, and that does allow me to access different materials. So I think you're right about that language question. As far as Michelangelo goes,
he was as good as they get, wasn't he, Michael?
Yeah. And he was, of course, a genius, not only an artist, but an inventor and expert in many fields. And sometimes I think when we're in the midst of a world that is changing, where we're trying to renegotiate a whole new picture of reality, for the benefit of all the people in this world. Sometimes you have to be not confined to one particular craft or talent or field of knowledge or artistic endeavor. You have to know about a lot of things in order to tie things together and communicate with people. So I think he was a good example of that. And as far as the Romans go, I really like Rome. They've got obelisks there that they brought from Egypt. They have all, the Pantheon, which is just an amazing piece of architecture, stood up for thousands of years, has this huge dome, and they call it the Pantheon because they would worship all the different gods that were present throughout the entire Roman Empire. Pan means all, and Theo means God or gods. So it was the Pantheon. That was pretty interesting.
Michael, we've got a minute left. I want to ask you, what are you working on next?
Well, I'm working on my presentation for the Stairway to the Stars event in November 10 to 12 in Las Vegas. I'm really looking forward to that. And I've got the manuscript for a book finished. Just trying to get a few more illustrations for it. And then hopefully that'll be out soon. And I'm working on a project in India called the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, which is going to be dedicated to presenting different aspects of Vedic cosmology, including Vimanas, for example. So those are some of the things that I'm working on. I've always got a lot going on.
Thank you, Michael. Let us know when the new manuscript is done and published, okay?
I will. I will definitely do that, George.
That's Michael Cremo. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. A couple of his books include Human Devolution, My Science, My Religion, Academic Papers, Forbidden Archaeology, that he published back a long, long time ago. Up next, we're going to take a walk on the paranormal side right here on Coast to Coast AM.